My son-in-law kissed my comatose daughter, then the nurse caught him tampering with her IV. Hospitals sound different at midnight, too clean, too awake. That night I rushed to Cedars-Sinai after the nurse's call. Come now, don't ask, just come. My daughter Lily lay in ICU, pale under the machine's quiet rhythm. My son-in-law Brandon was already there, hand on her forehead, whispering love that felt rehearsed. Then the nurse gripped my arm. Hide. Trust me. I ducked behind the curtain, heart pounding. Brandon's voice dropped to a murmur. You'll thank me soon, babe. You don't need the sedatives anymore, just this. He pulled out a capped syringe, flicked it once, and slid it into her foreline. My breath froze. The nurse's hand hit the intercom. Security's footsteps echoed before I could move. When I confronted him, he smiled. Relax, Walt. It's vitamins. I stared at him. You just kissed my dying daughter and poisoned her in the same breath. And the world stopped humming. I guess 99% of you will hear this. Sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? You can tell a hospital by its sound. Cedars-Sinai at midnight doesn't wail, it hums, steady and sterile, like it's holding its breath. I parked the Lexus in the quietest row of the garage, the engine ticking itself cool. My half-finished Starbucks sat in the cup holder, bitter and useless. I still had my Omega on habit from 30 years of firehouse shifts. The second hand was loud in my head, keeping time with something older, deeper. The badge reader beeped me through ICU security. That antiseptic chill hit right behind the eyes, all ammonia and hand sanitizer. I'd been in plenty of rooms that smelled like fear. This one was dressed up as healing. Lily was in room 402. My daughter. My only one. She was supposed to be improving low stimulation, the doctor said, like words were too heavy for her brain to lift. I expected to find her alone under that cold light, machines singing their beeping lullaby. But he was there, Brandon. My son-in-law, still in his designer suit, hair too perfect for a man sitting bedside. He looked up, surprised, then softened his face into that calm, performative husband look. Hey, Walt, she had a good day. You should have seen her earlier. His voice had the smoothness of someone who's practiced being trustworthy. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. Then a nurse, older, graying hair tucked under her cap, touched my arm. Go behind the curtain, she whispered, steady as a heartbeat. Trust me. Something in her tone cut through the fog. I stepped back into shadow, my stomach suddenly heavy. Brandon leaned over Lily's bed, murmuring, You rest, babe. He brushed her hair from her face with a tenderness that would have fooled anyone. Then he reached into a Dior tote resting on the visitor chair. My eyes caught the glint before my brain caught the meaning. A capped syringe. He flicked it once. Quiet. Practiced. The nurse's jaw tightened. She mouthed, Don't move. He bent down, iPhone flashlight on, the beam circling the IV line like a spotlight. I heard the faintest hiss as the needle found plastic. My training screamed shout. My muscles whispered wait. I've stood in burning houses where one wrong breath made the roof drop. This was that kind of silence, the kind that decides who walks out. The nurse's hand hovered near the intercom switch. Her other hand squeezed the tubing above his fingers, subtle, precise, slowing the flow. Professionals recognize each other in crisis. The smell of antiseptic thickened. The monitors kept their rhythm beep-beep like nothing happened. Brandon kissed Lily's forehead again. You'll thank me soon, he said softly. That was when I knew. It wasn't care. It was control. She pressed the call button. Somewhere down the hall, a chime rang routine to anyone else, but she just sent a coded message to the charge nurse. I lifted my phone, thumb trembling against the record button. 2 seconds. One frame of his hand, the clock on the wall, the reflection in the monitor screen. Enough. He pocketed the syringe and straightened his tie, glancing once toward the door. You'll be okay, babe, I got you, he whispered, and walked out like a man leaving a meeting he'd just closed. The nurse exhaled. We'll lock the line. Don't speak, she murmured, already moving. I followed her lead, clamping down the panic like smoke behind a door. There's a saying from my firehouse days. You don't shout at a fire, you outthink it. My pulse hammered as she sealed the IV bag in a plastic pouch, labeling the time. My phone still warm in my hand, proof ticking in sync with my watch. I didn't shout. I learned long ago that the quiet man holding the proof wins the fire. Hospitals have their own version of daylight, too clean, too constant, and far too honest. The ICU consult room was lit by fluorescence that didn't blink, humming over a framed ocean print that hung just slightly crooked, like even Serenity needed an escape angle. The nurse Park, her badge said, stood with her arms tight around a sealed plastic bag. Inside, the IV tubing and bag gleamed like captured evidence from a crime scene. Her voice was calm but absolute. "Sir, we're going to pull the line and bag. Everything sealed." Brandon turned on his politician's smile. "Big misunderstanding. Vitamins." I looked at him. "Which brand of vitamins comes in an unlabeled syringe?" He smirked. "You always did hate that I make more than your little hotel." I breathed through my nose. Slow. Controlled. The firehouse mantra surfaced from years ago. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. I repeated it silently while the charge nurse snapped evidence bags shut with that satisfying, irreversible click. Security stepped in 2 guards, uniforms crisp, body language soft enough to keep things civil. "Sir, we're going to have you step into the hallway while we complete this," one said. Brandon lifted his Rolex into the light, glancing at it like he was checking stock prices. "Sure, sure. Policy. I get it." His voice dripped arrogance. "You all take yourselves so seriously." Park didn't blink. "We take life seriously." That landed like a clean slap. They walked him out, calm and polite. No raised voices. No spectacle. Just escort procedure standard. Precise. The sound of his designer shoes receded down the hallway, soles squeaking faintly against disinfected linoleum. The charge nurse turned to me. "We're initiating a stat tox screen. Chain of custody in place." I nodded. "You'll have every legal form signed before you touch a drop." She smiled, faintly approving. Professionals speak in checklists, not emotions. A hospitalist arrived, eyes tired but sharp. "We'll draw a new sample immediately, witnessed and documented. Can you stay?" "I'm not leaving," I said. He hesitated. "You understand the result may take time." "Time's fine," I replied. Truth usually takes longer than lies. I sat at the small metal desk, the kind that doubles as both surface and shield, and opened my phone. My thumb hovered over Lily's contact photo for a heartbeat before I forced myself to switch to messages. I texted my attorney in Midtown, secure link attached. Video, timestamp, witness present. The upload bar crawled like molasses, each percent another breath I didn't trust myself to take. Then came the paperwork. Consent, authorization, evidence log. I initialed every page with my Mont Blanc. Black ink, steady, deliberate. There was something grounding about ink, the way it bit the paper, and said this happened. "Sir," the charge nurse said quietly, "security cameras cover this hallway. Should I flag them?" "Yes, note the camera IDs. I'll have counsel file a preservation letter tonight." "Understood." The hum of the air vents felt louder now, like the room itself was exhaling tension it hadn't known it held. Outside the door, Brandon's voice echoed faintly through the glass. "Unbelievable. I was just trying to help." I didn't get up. I'd been in too many burning buildings to chase smoke when the fire was already contained. The hospitalist handed me a copy of the tox order. "You did the right thing, Mr. Hale." I nodded once. "I've made a career out of following procedure. It's how people stay alive." By the time Brandon realized we had moved from feelings to forms, the forms had teeth. 48 hours later, I was back in civilization, or the country club version of it. Summit Oaks looked like money pretending to be modest. Lemon polish, white linen, and a December sun that warmed nothing but glassware. The valet ticket folded neatly into my wallet, my Omega ticking like a metronome against my wrist. I'd driven here out of habit, not hope. Brandon's mother had texted, "Let's clear the air, just family." That phrase always precedes a cleanup job. The terrace overlooked the golf course, a scene painted for people who mistake order for virtue. Heaters hissed beside each table, fighting a losing battle against the breeze. The in-laws were already assembled, Brandon's parents with their sympathy smiles. his sister in muted Dior, and Brandon himself lounging in that performative casualness that photographs well. Walt, his mother said, rising halfway, Cartier bracelet catching the light. You look tired. Are you sleeping at all? Some, I said. Hospitals have their own time zones. She nodded, the practiced sorrow of someone who collects empathy like a hobby. Brandon raised his mimosa. To Lily's recovery, he said, and calmer heads prevailing. The word calmer stung. I noticed the small details, the linen perfectly folded, the reflection of the silver pitcher, the soft whir of a leaf blower far off in the parking lot. All background noise to the theater of control. His father added, These medical investigations can be tricky. Best not to overreact before facts are clear. I kept my tone even. The facts are preserved, bagged, labeled, and time-stamped. Brandon smirked, turning toward the waiter as though dismissing a child. You know, Walt, he said, you were great in your day kicking doors, saving lives, big hero energy. But this is medicine and money, not axes. Someone snorted. The sound echoed sharper than it should have in the open air. I looked at him, studied the faint loose thread on his cuff, a tiny unraveling that caught the light each time he gestured. The kind of detail you'd miss unless you were trained to notice small breaks before they became structural failures. The best, I said, starts with truth. Brandon swirled his drink, the bubbles rising slow. Truth is perspective, he said. What you saw in that hospital was grief talking. I told security the same thing, grief paranoia. My coffee arrived. Bitter, perfect. I let it sit untouched. That's when Lily's best friend leaned across the table. Mr. Hale, she whispered, voice barely audible under the clatter of cutlery. He's been pushing her about paperwork power of attorney changes. Right before... She stopped when Brandon glanced her way. I shouldn't even say this. I nodded once. Enough. Brandon raised his glass again. We all want what's best for Lily, he said. Let's keep things professional, not emotional. That line, not emotional, was always the prelude to erasure. Funny, I said softly. I used to think emotion is what kept us running into burning buildings while everyone else waited for insurance claims. His laugh was low, sharp. That's the problem, Walt. You think everything's a fire. He leaned back, enjoying the small applause of polite laughter from his side of the table. I didn't give him the satisfaction of reaction. Instead, I reached for my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed his exact phrase, performative masculinity, word for word. Then I set the phone face down beside my untouched coffee. Across the terrace, a waiter adjusted a patio heater, and the reflection of the flame flashed against the silver pitcher. For a moment, it looked like a visor catching light in a smoky hallway, left hand on the wall, right hand reaching. I'd been here before. Smoke disguised as fog. I pushed my chair back. Excuse me, I said, voice steady. Leaving so soon? Brandon's mother asked. I smiled. Before my coffee cools. I left the table before my coffee cooled. Because a man can forgive an insult, but a pattern must be measured. Hospitals have a way of making you wait until you forget what day it is. I sat in the ICU waiting area, pretending to read the Wall Street Journal on my iPad, the words blurring into static. The vending machine hummed beside me, a sound too steady for grief. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in triplets, one of those rhythms that gets under your skin and stays there. A social worker appeared in the doorway. Her tone was kind but practiced. Mr. Hale, your daughter's awake. The doctor wants you in the family conference room. For a moment, my stomach lifted. Awake. It was the word I'd been waiting to hear. The room they led me into had walls the color of oatmeal and a flat-screen TV tuned to CNN on mute. Headlines scrolled by about a market rally, the kind of optimism that didn't belong here. Someone had left a trace of perfume in the upholstery, something floral, maybe Chanel, maybe memory. Lily was in the hospital bed, propped slightly upright, pale, blinking slow. Brandon stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on the rail. His watch caught the fluorescent light, and I felt the familiar click in my chest, the way adrenaline pretends to be calm. The hospitalist stood at the foot of the bed, chart in hand. We're just going to review some updates, she said gently. Lily's awake intermittently. We're watching her vitals. Dad, Lily said, her voice soft, thready. Please, no drama. Her eyes found mine, unfocused, but the words hit clear enough. Brandon took a half step closer, his tone rehearsed. We're grateful for your passion, Walt, but we're following doctor's orders. Let's let the professionals handle it. I turned to the hospitalist. And the toxicology results? She kept her voice neutral. Still pending, chain of custody intact. Of? Lily winced, the movement small but sharp. Please, just not now. That sentence cut 12 different ways: love, exhaustion, loyalty, fear. I couldn't tell which part hurt the most. The social worker leaned forward. Let's keep communication constructive, she said softly, glancing between us like a referee who's seen too many of these games. Brandon smiled, the kind that looks sympathetic if you don't know better. It's been a tough week for everyone. I think we all just need rest. Oh. I could feel the air thinning. Every muscle in my back tightened, but I stayed seated. Firefighters learn early that yelling inside a smoke-filled room only feeds the flame. Of course, I said. My voice sounded distant, like someone else had borrowed it. The hospitalist gave a small nod. We'll notify you as soon as results are in, Mr. Hale. Lily's eyelids fluttered, half asleep, half gone again. Her hand twitched toward Brandon's, and he took it with gentle possession, his thumb brushing her knuckles like punctuation on a claim. I sat still. Every instinct I had wanted to shout, to grab her hand back, to shake the room awake. But a quieter voice in me, the one shaped by years of sirens and smoke, said, Don't fight the fire. Isolate the fuel. I stood. Thank you, doctor. Keep me updated. As I stepped into the hallway, the muted television behind me switched to a new headline about leadership under pressure. Fitting. The corridor smelled like floor wax and antiseptic, the kind of clean that hides everything. I walked slowly, past a janitor's cart, past the vending machine again. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, tired but deliberate. For the first time since the sirens of my life quieted, I dialed them back up. The morning after the family meeting, I went back to the one place that had never lied to me, the hotel's back office. Small, cramped, windowless, but honest. The leather chair was cold, the kind that remembers when someone left in a hurry. My Mont Blanc pen sat where I'd dropped it 2 days earlier, beside a cooling cup of burnt coffee. The smell hit first. Same brand we used at Station 17. Cheap, bitter, loyal. This was where I felt like myself again. Not the grieving father, the builder, the man who knew where the switches were. I started with the attorney. Midtown, sharp, no nonsense, he answered on the second ring. Walt, he said, already typing. I could hear it. Activate the stopgaps, I told him. Letters first, hospital, club, in-laws, spoliation and preservation, everything documented. He hesitated just long enough to prove he understood what this meant. We'll need the security footage and Tox data chain of custody. Already logged, I said. Add a preservation notice to the country club while you're at it. The club? They're not as careful as they think. Next call, the CPA. He was in early, thank God for old habits. Morning, Walt. You sound wired. Distributions paused, I said. Any large outgoing flagged. We review everything before approval. He whistled softly. That's going to raise eyebrows. I'm counting on it. Then, Bank of America. I'd known the branch manager for 20 years, back when she was a teller who remembered every customer by name. Walt, she said, tone warm but cautious. You okay? Need new protocols, I said. Text confirmation for all wires. Dual, auth for transfers over $5,000. No exceptions, even me. Understood, effective immediately. Each call clicked into place like gears meshing. Smooth, precise. No yelling, no threats, no vengeance. Just systems doing what they were built to do, protect. Then the vendor who ran our payment gateway, a kid who'd built the software when he was still living with his parents. Hey, Mr. Hale, he said, chewing something, probably cereal. Flag unusual refunds, and anything new tied to Brandon's credentials, I said. You see a pattern, you freeze it. Got it. You think he's... Just do it. By mid-morning, I had a legal firewall, a financial minefield, and a digital tripwire all humming quietly in sync. Every system now required my confirmation, my timestamp, my signature. The last call was personal. The VFW hall commander, a man who'd known me before the gray hair and the corporate leases. "Commander," I said. "Cap," he replied. "I need you to pencil in a scholarship night. No press yet. Low key." He paused. "For Lily?" "For Lily and for what comes next." "Done." When the line clicked off, I sat in the silence that follows order being restored. Not peace order. There's a difference. I opened the Ring app on my phone, scrolling through saved footage. There he was, Brandon, a week ago, on my front porch. All faux concern and easy charm. Talking to the doorman like a man who'd rehearsed sincerity. I took a screenshot, captured the timestamp, and added it to the folder marked Evidence Primary. For a long moment I just sat there, pen in hand, eyes on the door to the office. Nothing looked different. The lobby still hummed faintly with breakfast chatter, the smell of fresh muffins creeping under the door. But beneath that calm surface, the levers were shifting. Accounts were tightening. Access was vanishing. By sundown, the switches were flipped, and the house looked the same until you tried the wrong door. The Midtown office smelled like cold coffee and toner, the kind of scent that clings to every law firm that's seen too much truth. From the window, sirens rose and fell, echoing off the glass towers like waves. I watched one pass below a blur of red and white and found myself unconsciously timing its Doppler fade. Old habits. You can take the man out of the firehouse, but not the calibration. Across the conference table, my attorney slid a folder toward me. "Preliminary talks came in," he said, voice flat but charged. "Zolpidem derivative. Not on her chart. Oh." I rubbed my thumb across the omega crystal, that smooth circle of time I always reached for when the world tilted. "So we're not crazy," I said. He nodded once, then handed over a small stack of envelopes. "Subpoenas ready, hospital logs, DocuSign trails, visitor badge scans, and phone records. Servers are lined up to deliver by end of day." I uncapped my Mont Blanc. The nib scratched across paper with a sound like a match being struck. Each signature felt like oxygen hitting flame. My phone buzzed mid-stroke. "CPA." I put it on speaker. "He tried to authorize a $75,000 consulting fee to a shell company," she said. "Blocked pending verification." "Consulting," I repeated. "For what?" Description field just says, "Personal Wellness Initiative." I smiled, no warmth in it. "Good, keep it blocked. Flag any other withdrawals over 10. My attorney leaned back. "He's flailing." "No," I said. "He's pivoting." We didn't have to wait long to see how. That afternoon, my phone started vibrating like a loose pipe. Notifications stacked up tags, screenshots, messages. Brandon had found a new weapon, the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group. The same people who posted about lost dogs and suspicious delivery vans were suddenly discussing concerning behavior from the hotel owner. Posts from anonymous accounts, sock puppets with names like Civic Dad 42 and Concerned Neighbor LA. "Unstable," one wrote. "He's accusing his son-in-law of poisoning his own daughter, probably dementia." I scrolled in silence, reading every lie like it was a line from an old arson report, each one carefully set, waiting for oxygen. I didn't reply. Didn't take the bait. Screenshots went into a folder labeled defamation, social. My lawyer would trace the metadata later. IP patterns, posting windows, recycled phrasing. Fire leaves fingerprints even when the arsonist thinks he's clever. Meanwhile, the hospital compliance officer called. "Mr. Hale, we reviewed visitor badge scans. Your son-in-law entered Lily's room at 0:32 that night. His name wasn't logged in for medication access, and pharmacy shows no dispense of Zolpidem under her attending." I thanked her quietly, already hearing how that would sound in court. Back in the law office, the printer spat out copies of the signed subpoenas, hot paper smelling faintly of ozone. My attorney gathered them up. "Process servers will handle the rest." "The in-laws too?" "Especially the in-laws," I said. "They've been laundering sympathy into narrative since brunch." He smiled, just barely. "You know, most people would have lost their temper by now." "Most people don't know where the power runs," I said. Outside, another siren climbed and fell, fading toward the East River. I breathed once slow, deliberate, and looked down at the conference table. The Mont Blanc rested beside the folder, ink drying like tiny black scars across the page. Let him build the bonfire of rumor. I was busy stacking the kind of wood that burns slow and can't be put out with a tweet. The boardroom at Summit Oaks smelled like lemon polish and old promises. polished walnut table, brass sconces, a bowl of mints that tasted like dust. The kind of room where people mistake formality for integrity. I'd sat through enough planning meetings in my life to know how the real business happens between the lines behind the smiles. The gala chair, a woman with perfect posture and a better Rolodex, clasped her hands. "We're delighted to have you speak, Walt. Your service to the community isn't the point," I said gently. "Lily is." Across the table, Brandon looked up, surprised. He was here as the family representative, which meant he thought the optics were his to control. "That's gracious of you," he said, leaning forward, relieved. I nodded once. "We try." He smiled, the small, self-satisfied kind that comes from believing you've won. The loose thread on his cuff had grown longer. Carelessness spreads like mold, quiet, invisible, until it's structural. While they debated lighting cues and table centerpieces, I studied the room like a scene commander. Exits, sightlines, microphone angles. I noted where the AV station sat near the double doors, perfect line of sight for playback. The gala would be held here, the same place he'd humiliated me with that performative masculinity jab weeks earlier. Fitting symmetry. The gala chair was talking about donor tears now. "We'll project photos of Lily's volunteer work during your remarks," she said brightly. "Perfect," I replied. "Let's call the segment Legacy Remarks." Short, clean, she earned that. She beamed. Brandon nodded approvingly. He thought this was reconciliation, the father extending olive branches for the cameras. I looked down at the mint bowl and ran my palm over the table's edge, too smooth, lacquered within an inch of its life. I remembered the raw lip of a burned doorframe, splintered and rough, where your hand could grip even as the heat bit back. The smoothest things are often the most dangerous. Nothing to hold when you push. When the meeting adjourned, Brandon lingered. "Thank you," he said, voice softer now. "This means a lot to Lily." I met his eyes. "Everything I do is for her." He mistook that for sentiment. I meant logistics. Back at the hotel, I turned my office into a staging area. The exhibits came together piece by piece. Chain of custody logs from the hospital, screenshots from the Ring camera, copies of Brandon's flag transfer attempts, the tox report's preliminary notation, zolpidem derivative, inconsistent with chart. Each labeled, simple, visual, no drama, just evidence. 2 witnesses confirmed, the ICU nurse and the charge nurse, both subpoenaed, both willing. The CPA prepped a summary of unexplained attempted disbursements. My attorney coordinated quietly with hospital risk management, threading the line between fact and decorum. Security was next. I called the off-duty officer who handled the hotel's night patrols. "I need you in a suit at the gala," I said. "Stay quiet unless I nod." Oh, he didn't ask why. Old school men rarely do. By midnight, the plan was set. A chessboard with every piece locked in place. Brandon had his image. I had the infrastructure. He had followers. I had files. On my desk, the invitation card for the Summit Oaks Hospital Foundation Gala glowed under the desk lamp, embossed lettering, gold trim, theme, an evening of compassion and community. The irony was almost too clean. I leaned back, listening to the faint hum of the vending machine down the hall, the hotel settling for the night. It was the same sound as a building breathing before the first alarm. The only thing left was to see whether the man who loved the mirror could face one he didn't control. The VFW hall smelled like burnt coffee and old varnish, the kind of scent that never leaves because it's built into the wood. Tuesday night, the place was half lit, flag at half-mast, and the same generator hum that's underscored every meeting since the Gulf War years. The coffee urn in the corner had been here longer than half the men in the room, dented but loyal. My people were already there. The commander leaned on the lectern, posture easy but eyes sharp. Gus, my old engineer, sat in the back row polishing his glasses on his shirt, same habit he had before every inspection. The CPA had a laptop open, slides queued up. My attorney's voice echoed faintly through the speakerphone, crisp and measured. "All right," I said, tapping the mic. It crackled, smelling faintly of old speeches. "Let's walk through it one last time." The commander looked at me over the rim of his mug. "You sure you want a public light, brother?" "I am," I said. "Sunlight, not gasoline." He nodded once, like a man who knows there's no pulling a hose once it's charged. We started the slideshow. First frame, timeline. Simple, clean, dates, no drama. The moment in the ICU, the tox report timestamp, the block transfer, the audit log. Second frame, chain of custody. Flow chart in calm blues and grays, the way I used to color code command boards. Third, financial irregularities. The CPA cleared his throat. The audit slides, clear, clean design, no jargon. Good, I said. People stop listening when you sound smarter than them. Then came the muted clip 7 seconds from the ICU. Brandon leaning over Lily, flashlight beam catching his hand, the capped syringe, the shadow of the nurse just visible behind the curtain. No sound, no commentary, just the truth framed in silence. Even in this empty hall, it changed the air. Gus exhaled softly. You always did follow procedure. The attorney's voice through the speaker cut the silence. Read this line exactly before the video. We followed procedure. That's your anchor. I nodded. Understood. The commander adjusted the flag slightly, its fringe nicked and fraying. Left or right of the lectern, someone asked. Right, Gus said automatically. Honor first. They argued for a minute, old habits of ceremony filling the space like breathing. Then we got back to work. I practiced the opening short, measured, stripped of sentiment. This is not accusation, this is process. Each word weighed. I'd learned years ago that volume and authority aren't the same thing. The CPA clicked through the rest. Security camera metadata, visitor logs, bank alerts. I made notes with the Mont Blanc, ink neat, deliberate. Next to me sat 2 sealed envelopes, one for the hospital council, one for the gala chair. Inside copies of the evidence and a letter of record. The attorney ran through the checklist again. Backup thumb drives? 2, I said. Printed exhibits. In my briefcase. Security aware? They'll blend in. Suits, earpieces, no flash. Oh, why? The commander nodded. Then you're ready. For a while, no one spoke. We just sat in the half-dark, each man in his own head, the projector fan cooling to a soft whine. I looked around at faces I'd trusted with my life. None of them asked what it would feel like to expose a son-in-law, or what came after. They already knew. Some things you don't rehearse. You endure them. I felt the ridged back of my Omega press against my wrist bone steady, heartbeat of metal against skin, and cataloged what mattered. Lily breathing on her own. Paperwork that held under scrutiny. Friends who showed up on a Tuesday night. When we killed the house lights and the screen went dark, the room was so quiet, I could hear the clock tick toward the moment he'd run out of places to hide. Summit Oaks had been dressed to impress. The chandeliers threw light like champagne, and the flower walls looked more expensive than sincerity. A champagne pyramid dared gravity in the center of the ballroom, each glass trembling from the low hum of the band warming up. Edison bulbs lined the bar to give the illusion of warmth curated, not felt. The valet took my Lexus key with a quiet nod. Inside, my Omega read 6:58 p.m. right on schedule. The hotel's events director waved me toward the front table. I could smell the mix of perfume, dry ice from the chilled bottles, and the faint bite of citrus cleaner from the freshly wiped lectern. Brandon's family arrived like they'd practiced it. Mother in a sequined navy gown, father in a tux that screamed legacy money, Brandon himself in his usual tuxedo smile. He made small talk with the donors, dispensing charm like hors d'oeuvre. When he saw me, he grinned, raised his glass slightly and mouthed, "Glad you came." Oh. The gala chair, luminous in silver silk, stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice bright enough to carry. "Tonight we honor compassion, resilience, and the people who build legacies that outlast us. Please welcome a man of service, Walter Hale." Polite applause, measured, courteous. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and approached the lectern. From our table, Brandon Stage whispered, "Try not to cry this time, Walt." His mother's Cartier bracelet chimed when she clapped. The microphone was too tall. I adjusted it. The glass of water beside me smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, proof that even polish leaves residue. I took a breath, felt the ridged edge of my Omega against my wrist, and began. "I'm here tonight," I said, "for Lily." A ripple of nods. "And for the nurses who follow procedure when fear says don't." Brandon leaned back, smirking, already pulling out his iPhone like he was about to capture a sentimental tribute. He thought I was about to cry under the chandeliers. I kept my voice even. Legacy, I said, isn't about what we own. It's about what we uphold when no one is watching. The rookie from Station 17 flashed in my head, his nervous voice. Cap, do we have to do the checklist every time? My answer had been automatic. Especially when you don't want to. That memory steadied me. I glanced at the AV technician. The first slide came up. A simple title, Posture and Proof. No adjectives. No emotion. Just the bones of a story everyone in this room, from the physicians to the donors, could respect facts, verified, time-stamped. The next slide. Timeline. A single line running across the screen dates, hours, the sterile rhythm of process. A quiet murmur spread through the tables, that collective rustle of people realizing this wasn't a eulogy. Brandon's smile wavered. He pocketed his phone. I continued, my tone measured. Neutral, the cadence of a sworn statement. On December 3rd, 0:32 hours, a visitor entered room 402 at Cedars-Sinai. The same visitor's badge was scanned without a corresponding medication log. The following morning, a nurse filed a report documenting procedural inconsistency. Chain of custody was initiated, verified, and sealed. A pause. I let the air settle. The chandeliers hummed faintly, or maybe that was my pulse. I stand here not as a father, but as a man who's spent his life believing in procedure. We followed it. And then I said the one sentence that turns a room from mood to evidence. We followed procedure. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brandon's father glance toward the AV booth. Brandon's smile froze halfway, his hand tightening around the stem of his champagne glass. The room was warm now, not from the bulbs or the wine, but from the slow, collective realization that the air had changed. The lights dimmed until the chandeliers looked like constellations trapped in glass. The crowd quieted, the kind of hush that feels earned, not asked for. My slides glowed pale blue against the linen and crystal, every pixel clean. I rested a hand on the lectern, the omega cool against my wristbone. This, I began, is not a story, it's a record. Slide 1 clicked up. A timestamp in bold. Visitor badge scan, 011. I spoke slowly, like a checklist. Visitor badge registered at 0011 hours. Room 402, ICU access. Recorded by Cedars-Sinai security log. The audience murmured soft, professional interest. They'd seen charts before. Slide 2, medication dispensing log. None recorded for patient. 402 at 014. Pharmacy automation, I said. Every withdrawal time, stamped. At 0014, no medication logged under Lily Hale's attending physician. No vitamin therapy, no sedative order, nothing. I let the silence stretch a heartbeat longer than comfort allows. Someone's fork tapped against glass, then stopped. Slide 3. Chain of custody seal applied. 019. This seal, I said, pointing, was applied by the charge nurse. Evidence secured. Chain verified. I could feel the room recalibrate. Donors shifted in their seats. Doctors leaned forward. Administrators straightened. Then the still image appeared. The muted video's midpoint. Brandon's hand on the IV port. Syringe in frame. Digital clock glowing 016. No sound. Just proof. The hush that followed was surgical. Brandon stood slowly, that smooth, expensive smile already forming. Okay, he said, laughing once, too loud. This is vitamin therapy. Everyone's doing it. It helps cell recovery. The laughter didn't spread. I tilted my head. At 0016, I said, when the medication cart was logged across the ward. He blinked, eyes flicking to the screen, then back to me. I was assisting a nurse, he stammered. The ballroom lights hummed, waiting. And then, from the back of the room, a voice steady, tired, unshakable. No, she said. Every head turned. The ICU nurse stepped forward, uniform under her blazer, name badge visible. You weren't assisting anyone, she said. You were alone in the room. I was on the other side of that curtain. Her tone wasn't angry. It was factual, the kind of tone people use when they've said the same sentence too many times to care about reaction. Brandon's mother whispered his name. The father's hand went still around his glass. I didn't move, didn't gloat. I just clicked back to the chain of custody slide. We followed procedure. I said again, voice even, the way you'd say fire contained. For 2 seconds, exactly two, I heard my own breath through the mic. It reminded me of my wife's funeral, the moment before the eulogy when a room leans forward because the truth is the only oxygen left. Brandon tried to recover. You don't understand. She asked me to bring it. She wanted... The nurse shook her head once. She was unconscious. He froze. The slide behind me didn't blink. It didn't care. I looked at him, not as a father, but as an incident commander assessing a site. Containment achieved. The gala chair rose halfway, uncertain whether to intervene. I nodded slightly toward the AV booth. The screen faded to black. I closed my folder, every paper in order, every envelope sealed. Legacy, I said quietly into the mic, means procedure outlasting emotion. And then I stepped back, the light from the chandeliers catching on the glass of water beside me. When the nurse said, "No, you weren't," it sounded less like a rebuttal and more like a door closing. The ballroom lights rose halfway, just enough to make the chandeliers look like they were listening. The air buzzed a murmur like bees in a jar. Everyone had seen the still image. Now they wanted a reason, something to file the shock under. I didn't raise my voice. "We've discussed procedure," I said. "Let's look at what procedure protects." The screen shifted to the next slide. Audit summary. Transactions flagged. Clean layout. 3 bullet points. No adjectives. The CPA stepped forward, his tie slightly askew, his voice cutting through the hush. "Here is a proposed transfer of $75,000 labeled consulting, attempted within 24 hours of the ICU incident." He paused just long enough for the timestamp to register on the screen. It was blocked by dual authentication. The slide changed 3 arrows linking dates to bank accounts. One marked attempted, not cleared. I could hear forks clinking down, wine glasses set aside. That sound a room shifting from gossip to judgment. I added, "DocuSign metadata shows a draft power of attorney circulated last week. It's unsigned." The screen displayed another slide headers redacted except for initials. Timestamps visible down the side. No speculation, just data. Brandon let out a laugh, the kind people use to break tension and hide panic. "This is anti-entrepreneur," he said, half to the crowd, half to himself. I didn't look at him. "This," I said, "is anti-theft." A low rumble moved through the tables, the kind of sound you get when politeness starts to burn off like fog. His mother straightened, voice brittle. "Walter, really?" The room didn't like that really. It landed wrong. A note too sharp in an orchestra that had just found its key. The CPA clicked his remote. "Had these authorizations gone through," he said, "control of certain accounts and hotel assets would have shifted temporarily, but substantially if the principal were declared incapacitated." Simple sentence. One that turned motive from theory into math. Across the room, heads turned not toward me, but toward Brandon, then toward the hospital board table, where administrators sat suddenly very still. I felt the scent of the ballroom coffee burnt sweet, a memory from another kind of night. Wildfire season. I remembered sitting in the command trailer, whiteboard fumes thick in the air, writing names instead of numbers, each one a life, not a line item. Lily was not a conduit. I rested my Mont Blanc on the table in front of me. Not a flourish, just placement. A point of contact. Legacy, I said quietly, isn't built on what you can take when someone's unconscious. It's built on what you refuse to touch. Brandon's father cleared his throat. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said. "You raised funds in this room for medical ethics, patient trust, and transparency. Consider this, the transparency portion." The CPA advanced to the final slide. 3 columns. Attempted transfers. Proposed authorizations. Compliance holds. Dates aligned like dominoes. I didn't need to explain the arrows that pointed inward, money flowing toward one destination, toward one name. Brandon sank back in his chair. The sweat on his temple caught the light. I could feel the crowd's loyalty turning. From polite neutrality to something sharper, protective instinct, moral clarity. I stepped away from the mic. The AV operator dimmed the screen automatically, as if the evidence itself needed rest. We didn't need to shout motive. The arrows on the slide did it for us. The air in the ballroom had changed. You could taste a champagne that suddenly felt metallic, laughter thinning into static. The chandeliers still threw light, but it wasn't celebratory anymore. It was interrogative. The gala chair stood, her poise slightly cracked, and leaned into the mic. "Let's take a brief recess," she said. The kind of tone people use when they're trying to sound in control while the floor is moving beneath them. Clusters formed instantly. Small constellations of donors, board members, and physicians. You could track allegiances by the angle of their shoulders. The ICU nurse who'd just dismantled a lie with one clean sentence found herself surrounded by doctors thanking her quietly, awkwardly, sincerely. She kept shaking her head, embarrassed, wiping a tear she pretended wasn't there. Near the stage, the hospital's compliance director and two board members conferred in urgent whispers. Then one of them, a man whose name had adorned half the plaques in the building, walked straight to the microphone. "We'll initiate an outside review first thing tomorrow," he said. Applause fierce, almost defiant, the kind of clapping that wasn't about him but about the principle. I didn't join in. I just stood still and let the sound wash over me. Brandon's father leaned forward, his face tightening into the mask of old money losing control. "This is ambush," he hissed low. I finally looked at him. "This is sunlight." He recoiled as if from heat. Then, from the back of the room, another voice rose gravelly, familiar. My VFW commander, standing uninvited. "Our post will fund a scholarship," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "For nurses who hold the line. In Lily's honor." The applause doubled. No polite clapping, now real noise, raw and grateful. The commander nodded toward me once, and I nodded back. That was all. Across the room, I caught motion 3 of my longtime business partners, the landscaping contractor, the laundry service owner, and the head of the security firm. Men who'd built their lives on steady handshakes and quiet competence. They looked at me, nodded once, and slipped away to their phones. By tomorrow morning I knew what those calls would mean. Contracts on hold. Pending clarification. We'll need to review our partnerships with the Whitmore Family LLC. Brandon stood now, trying to recover the stage. "Everyone, please, this is a misunderstanding, an overreaction. Lily's fine, But the room didn't bend toward him anymore. Conversations didn't pause for him to speak. He was sound without gravity. I could see it, the slow, organic shift of a community's loyalty. It didn't happen with shouting or spectacle. It happened in silence, in glances, in people quietly deciding who still deserved to be called neighbor. I felt my Omega's weight against my wrist. The inscription on the back pressed faintly against my skin, names of my old crew from Station 17, men who'd trusted me with their lives and their jokes. For a moment I could almost hear one of them laughing under his breath. "Hell of a speech, Cap." The applause for the commander's pledge finally faded. Someone restarted the playlist. The band began to play again, too soon, too bright, but nobody moved to dance. The gala chair exhaled, eyes glassy. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," she said quietly as I stepped off the stage, "for your clarity." I smiled once, the polite kind. "Clarity's contagious," I said. When the band started playing again, it wasn't for dancing. It was cover music for a realignment. By dawn, the consequences started arriving like mail after a storm, some expected, some heavier than they looked. The first ping came before sunrise, then another, then 20 more. The hotel office was still half dark, CNN murmuring low on the lobby TV. My Starbucks sat cooling on the desk beside a stack of forms I no longer needed to read. The leather chair creaked as I leaned back, phone lighting up again. Voicemail, 6:42 a.m. "Mr. Hale, this is Marcus from Summit Oaks Country Club. The board met early. The Whitmore membership is suspended pending an ethics review. We'll be in touch." A pause, as if he wanted to add something but didn't. "Off the record, sir. Good work last night." I let the message end on its own, the last note of cautious admiration hanging there. Another notification. Email. Subject. Vendor agreement termination. "Walt, we're out on that consulting thing. Doesn't smell right. Hope you're okay. Lunch soon? Tom. Evergreen Laundry Services." I smiled. Just once. Then the Neighborhood Watch moderators posted, "We've archived all previous posts regarding the Hale family. Respect ongoing reviews. We'll cooperate with lawful requests for metadata." Clean, polite, digital decency in writing. Across my inbox. pending holds, canceled transfers, suspended accounts. Words that, in another context, might feel punitive. This morning they sounded like restoration. The Mont Blanc lay uncapped beside me, ink drying from last night's signature on the protective order motion my attorney had drafted. The language was careful, limited, procedural, grounded in capacity review. It wasn't revenge. It was safety paperwork. I opened my iPad to the Wall Street Journal. Didn't read a word. Just stared at the date. The kind of date that ends up in case headers and memory, side by side. Then the call came I hadn't expected. "Mr. Hale?" The voice was soft, cracking. "It's Emily. From the hospital. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. "You don't need to." "No, please." They pressured her. Brandon's parents. She was scared. They told her it would all go away if she stayed quiet. I should have told you sooner. The sound of her crying through the phone was small and real. "You told me now," I said. Silence. Then a breath that sounded like a weight being set down. "She's awake more now, asking questions. About you." I looked at the clock on my laptop. 8:12. Time for people to start rewriting their stories. "Tell her I'll wait," I said. "But only when she's ready to listen." We hung up. I forwarded thank you emails to the ICU nurse for integrity under pressure, to the VFW commander for the scholarship, to the club manager for doing the right thing early, before the wind shifted too far. 3 thank yous for every one demand that was the ratio I could live with. Outside, the hotel's parking lot was waking up. Delivery trucks reversing with long, steady beeps. Staff in polos unlocking the side doors. Normal life continuing as it always does after sirens. I downloaded the Ring camera clips, every time-stamped piece of evidence, backed up to 2 drives. One for me, one for counsel. Chain of custody habits never die. They just change uniforms. My hand rested on the desk. I breathed once. Slow. Order, I've learned, isn't a feeling. It's a stack of confirmations. And for the first time in weeks, the silence in my office didn't sound like loss. It sounded like equilibrium. The blinds sliced the afternoon light into measured bars across the ICU floor. The portable HEPA unit hummed, steady and low, like the ocean pretending to breathe for her. I'd promised myself, no speeches, just facts, just air between sentences. "Consent verified," the nurse said quietly, signing the note on her tablet. She gave Lily's hand a squeeze before stepping out, the door closing with that padded hush only hospitals manage. I set the tray table closer, laid down 3 items, no more, no less. The chain of custody form. A still frame printed from the 7-second video. The audit line showing the attempted transfer. "Did you know everything?" she asked, voice rasped thin. "Only what I can prove," I said, and enough to slow him down. The paper edges caught a slant of sunlight. She stared at them, not flinching, just tracing the lines with her eyes as if memorizing geography she once lived in. "I thought I could fix it after the wedding," she whispered. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence does more work than comfort. She looked up then, finding the ceiling tile with the hairline crack. Same one she'd fixated on every time she drifted awake. I followed her gaze, saw it again, the small fracture running just off center, the kind that means nothing to the structure but everything to the mind staring at it. "Dad," she said finally, turning her face toward me, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Make it safe to tell the truth." For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Then, "Okay," I said. "Here's how." I spoke slowly, careful not to sound like command. "From now on, every conversation with him or his family happens with a hospital advocate in the room. Everything recorded with your consent. No more hallway talks, no more private visits." She nodded faintly. "Financially, we freeze everything that has your name attached until this review's done. That means control stays neutral, no signatures, no withdrawals, no surprises." Another nod. "When you're discharged, you'll stay at my hotel suite. We'll change the door code, limit the guest list. You'll have quiet. You'll have air." Her eyes fluttered shut, then opened again, as if testing the idea of safety and finding it real. "You'll handle the press?" she asked, almost smiling. "I'll handle the paperwork," I said. She exhaled, the kind of breath that empties a whole season. Then she did something I hadn't seen since she was a kid, raised her hand slightly, palm flat, a small salute. "I trust you," she said. I didn't reach for her. I just nodded, because touch can rush what should take time. We sat like that, the machines marking seconds between us. I counted my breaths the way I used to before breaching a door. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on 5 my hands stopped wanting to shake. The nurse re-entered, checked the vitals, made a quick note. "She's stable," she said, eyes kind. Outside, the winter light shifted again, turning the blind stripes into a softer grid. I gathered the papers back into their envelope, slid it into my coat. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for a runway. And that was enough. When I left the room, the hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and oranges from someone's lunch down the ward. The world, for the first time in months, smelled like a place that could heal. The VFW hall smelled like chili, coffee, and redemption if redemption had a scent. Crockpots lined the folding tables, steam curling up like small trains. On the stage, a boot vase held carnations beneath Lily's photo. Someone had added a string of paper hearts. Homemade, uneven, perfect. We called it Ruth's Night. After the scholarship, we'd started Nurses Who Tell the Truth When It's Hardest. The name came from the ICU charge nurse, Ruth Park, who'd refused to look away. Half an hour before the ceremony, my phone buzzed. Security. Low. "He's here." I stepped into the vestibule. The cold draft hit first. Then Brandon's cologne, a scent that tried too hard to remember money. He was at the door. Tuck's jacket open. Smile tight. "This is harassment," he said, reaching for his phone like it could turn the world back. I raised mine. My attorney's voice on speaker. "Hand him the order," calmly. Our security guard, retired MP, offered a manila envelope. "This is a court document, sir. You've been served." Brandon's eyes flicked from the seal to the camera lens above the door. The smile cracked. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Correct," I said. "It's paused." He hesitated just long enough for the world to see him outside the glass, then left. Inside, no one mentioned it. They didn't need to. The hall was full of people who understood enforcement without spectacle. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered on. Lily appeared pale but steady, wrapped in a hospital blanket, a nurse's hand visible on the edge of the frame. Her voice filled the room. "Thank you for the nurses who told the truth when I couldn't. For the people who didn't turn away when it got uncomfortable. I'm learning that safety and love aren't the same thing, but they should be." Silence. Not the awkward kind, the holy kind. Then a wave of applause that wasn't about pity. The first scholarship check, $5,000, went to Ruth. She tried to refuse it. Everyone laughed softly until she relented, cheeks red. Then Evan stood. My son. My quiet one. He adjusted the mic, throat tight. "Dad," he began, voice catching. "I was a coward. I saw things I didn't question because it was easier. I thought silence was neutrality. It wasn't. It was surrender." A murmur moved through the room, people breathing with him. He swallowed hard, looked straight at me. "You taught me about fires. I just forgot they don't always come with smoke." He stepped back, wiping his eyes. "No excuses, just accountability." When my turn came, I didn't climb the stage. I stood at floor level, close enough to the tables, to the people, to the coffee smell that grounded me. "Forgiveness," I said, "begins with paperwork and ends with behavior." I paused, scanning faces. We've seen both kinds of paperwork this week, court orders and scholarships. One stops harm, the other starts healing. The trick is remembering they're part of the same line. A ripple of nods, a few hands reaching for others. I looked at Lily's picture on the easel, her smile halfway between tired and free. Boundaries don't mean bitterness. They mean we finally stopped mistaking tolerance for love. When the applause came, it wasn't loud, it was steady, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. Someone spilled coffee nearby. The smell hit sweet and burnt and home. I thought, not Triumph Repair. Outside, the parking lot was dusted with frost. The air had that post-storm stillness where you can almost hear things growing again beneath the quiet. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The Midtown Law office looked the same as it had months ago. Same floor-to-ceiling glass. Same hum of traffic bleeding through. But this time, The room felt lighter. The air wasn't holding its breath anymore. Outside, sirens passed on Lexington, Doppler fading into a normal afternoon. Inside, my Mont Blanc scratched quietly across paper as the attorney slid the revised trust toward me. "Protective provisions here," he said, tapping the page. "Medical decisions require co-signature from an independent advocate. Asset transfers need dual consent." I nodded, reading slower than usual. Each clause was a lesson learned the hard way. "And Lily's living trust?" "She's the grantor," he said. "You're out unless she asks." I smiled at that. "Good. It's her name that needs to breathe." He capped the pen, leaning back. "You built her a room with windows and locks." I looked down at the signature line and signed anyway. The ink pooled dark and clean. When we finished, he slid me a thin envelope. "Hospital letter came this morning," he said. It was from Cedars-Sinai's administration. Polite, formal, almost embarrassed in its gratitude. They were implementing new visitor badge protocols, audit logs for off-hour access, and a commendation for Nurse Ruth Park for professional courage under duress. No plaque, just a promise. The kind that matters. 2 days later, the country club sent its own envelope, one sentence long. "Membership terminated pursuant to Section 12 of the Code of Conduct. No press release, no appeal." Just a silence that said everything. And then the DA's office published a short press release. "Prosecutors have filed charges based on evidence consistent with prior investigations. No mention of me, no need." I forwarded it to counsel with one line. "We'll let the courts do their work." That night, I sat at the kitchen table of my hotel suite, paperwork spread out, cup of diner, coffee cooling beside my Omega. The engraving on its back had always carried the names of my old crew. Tonight, I traced the letters with my thumb and silently added one more. Ruth. Not for heroics, for consistency. Weeks later, Lily asked to meet at the park across from the hospital. She walked slower but steadier, her coat buttoned wrong by one notch, hair catching the wind. We sat on a bench near the ambulance bay. "I got the apartment," she said. "Small place, windows that face east." "Good," I said. "Morning light's honest." She smiled faintly. "And a new bank account. No shared access." "Perfect." The ambulance doors opened across the street, paramedics moving like practiced choreography. She watched them for a while, then said, "I'm not ready to forgive him." "Okay," I said. "I'm not ready to forget." "Oh." We sat in silence until the ambulance rolled away, siren pulsing through daylight like a heartbeat turned mechanical. "You think it gets easier?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just clearer." She leaned back, eyes half closed. "That's enough." And it was. Back at the office later, I filed the club notice and the hospital letter side by side in the same drawer. Not trophies, just records. The same place I'd keep the scholarship receipts and a copy of the first thank you note we got from a nurse applicant. The world hadn't turned dramatic. It had turned functional. When the ambulance outside my window took the corner and the siren faded into distance, I realized that order doesn't sound like victory. It sounds like breath.